Good morning, everybody. Happy Sunday if you're watching this Sunday. This is Mira Morton, aka the Bossy Coach, and I'm coming at you today with kind of a wild one. I didn't do my Facebook Live at my normal day and time. Normally, I do Saturday mornings. I was actually celebrating my fifth wedding anniversary. Woo! Told my husband, I was like, dude, I'm not even sick of you at all. Like, I might be less annoyed by you than I was when we met. Which is saying something, right? Like, because we're usually not annoyed with people when we meet them. Um, so we had a lovely time. We spent the night at the hotel where we got married, and we had dinner there, and we had this pretty wild, fun conversation on Friday night. And it was during that conversation that I was telling him about this idea that I've been thinking about, and I got kind of excited about it. And he was like that is a Facebook Live or a blog post or I don't know what. And so that is what I wanted to raise with you today. And it's something that I'm still like I've got the idea kind of sorted in my head, but I haven't written it down much. So I don't necessarily have like the way to talk about it completely sorted. So bear with me a little bit as I explore it today. I made some notes before this, but I'm going to be kind of practicing figuring it out as I talk to you about it. And I welcome any questions or feedback that you have, or just if you're trying to understand what I'm trying to say, to please send me those questions because that will help me kind of figure out how to articulate it better and like what are the things that I kind of missed as I talked about it. So with that lead in, I want to talk today about this idea, biblical idea, that we are made in the image of God. And it's not like I spent a ton of time thinking about this before. I'm not a practicing Christian. This is, I don't spend a lot of time trying to figure out the Bible, but I have been doing a lot of reading. I started working on A Course in Miracles last year. It's like a trillion pages, so I didn't make it through the whole thing. I had other things I wanted to do. So it turns out not finishing that. But I did read a fair amount of it, and I find it to be very profound. That's another one of those books. I've been doing a lot of reading about Abraham too. And A Course in Miracles is a transmission book, if you buy into that idea that God is really speaking through and writing through a person. So it's not even them interpreting. It's like literally, this is what he said to me. So kind of this idea about Muhammad and the Quran, that these are transmissions. So Muhammad didn't write it, God wrote it, and Muhammad was the vehicle. A Course in Miracles, I think, is similar. It's supposed to, the idea is that it's Jesus speaking, kind of updating us on like, okay, here's what I meant. You didn't quite get it. And I find it profound when I read things that are transmissions. The same thing with reading Eckhart Tolle. It's not a transmission, but a realized being, somebody who has come into oneness, like is in a constant state of oneness with their true identity, their true self, their true connection to God. I find those types of readings really powerful, and I like to spend a lot of time reading them. And so they really influence my thinking. And I find the experience of reading them to be super different than just reading somebody else's ideas. Now, I think God flows through us and is in all of those other ideas too, but sometimes they get, there's the lens of the person and the person's mind. So you have this creative force coming through a person who's writing a book. And so those creative ideas are from God and it's God energy, but it gets filtered through that person's mind. And if that person has limiting beliefs or this angled view of the world, which we all do because we're people and we see things from our own perspective, then that comes out in the book. And so sometimes you can find these deep truths within these books, but they're also built around a bunch of stuff that like may not quite be correct. So when you read a transmission, or just when I read A Course in Miracles, Eckhart Tolle, Abraham, like to me, they just feel different as you read them. And I found them to be some of the most transformative things that I have read. So I've been reading a lot of that stuff over the last 5 years or so. And A Course in Miracles, one of the big ideas that really leapt out at me was this idea that we have no passive thoughts, that all of our thoughts are creative. The little ones, the big ones, the fleeting ones. Now, I think the fleeting ones, we could have a whole other conversation about what do you do about all the little fleeting ones that come up. Um, that we don't like and we really don't want to have be creating in our lives. And I think that's a separate conversation. I would just tell you now, don't be that worried about it. But certainly this idea that our thoughts create, and this is kind of the way we harness the energy of the universe, is a really powerful one. And to me, makes me eager to go figure out how to control my thoughts more and create the thoughts that I want to create, so that what I'm creating with them is what I want to be creating with them. We have a lot of, as my coach Brooke refers to them, unintentional thoughts that just are on repeat because they're habitual. It's the way that we've thought all along, and our brain likes to automate things and not have them require a lot of conscious energy. And so most of the thoughts we think are habitual thought patterns that we've developed and that we don't question and that we think are just true. And so getting out of that habit is one of the main sources of work I do with my coach, and why I love her approach to life coaching, because to me this is the work, right? So all of our thoughts create. We are creative beings, therefore, because we think. Abraham talks about this concept in a different way, that it's our feelings that create, that our feelings are create vibrations, or our feelings are vibrations. I've talked to you about this. This is what I think intuition is as well. And so we get this vibration, and it's our vibration that draws similar vibration to us, that like attracts like. And so if you want to change what you're manifesting, if you want to change what you're creating, so again, this idea that we are creators, you have to change your vibration. And then they talk about all these different ways that you can do that, and they give you a lot of different exercises. And I think it's when I add my coach's work and her concept of the model to all of this, it's where it really starts to come together to me. So Brooke's teaching from the Life Coach School, her fundamental tool is the model, which is this idea that we have circumstances in the world that are beyond our control, things that happen, and they are inherently neutral, all of them. So like even the most horrible thing you can imagine, it's actually neutral. It's our thoughts about those things that are what make our experience of them, right? Like today I was wrestling with making a deadline or missing a deadline, and missing the deadline is totally neutral, but my thought about it is what's making me upset about missing a deadline. So we have neutral circumstances, then we have our thoughts about neutral circumstances, and that's our whole life experience is a reflection of the thoughts we have about circumstances. And as we learn to kind of pull those apart, we gain agency over our thoughts, and we can actually choose to think about things in ways that serves us. And then our thoughts give rise to our feelings, and our feelings determine how we act and the actions that we take. And then our actions determine our results. So if you look at that in the framework that I've just been talking about our thoughts are creative, according to A Course in Miracles, that our feelings are vibrations. If you look at how you feel, you'll know what you're going to create, right? And that we have the power to create universes kind of at our fingertips. That's that Abraham idea. It makes sense, right? So we have thoughts, and our thoughts determine how we feel. Like we don't have feelings that don't arise from thoughts. You may not be aware of the thoughts that are giving rise to your feelings, but they literally do not happen. And by feelings, I mean emotions. So not sensations like you burn your finger, but anger, sadness, grief, disappointment, resistance, all the things. All of those types of emotions come from thoughts, all of them, whether or not you're aware of the thoughts. I challenge you to go play with that one because it's super fun truth. And then how we feel about the things we're thinking determines the actions that we take. So if you're one of those people who are like, I swear to God, I planned I was going to go do this thing, and then why don't I ever follow through? You're thinking something that's making you feel a certain way, that's causing you to take actions that are counter to what like your prefrontal cortex wants to do. It has a plan for you, and the rest of your brain is not following through on that plan. And so thoughts give rise to feelings, give rise to the actions that we take, and that leads to the results in our lives. So Brooke would say that we are creating through our actions. It's not like the vibrations themselves create a thing. I think Abraham's version of that is a little bit more complex, although Brooke is certainly super influenced by the work of Abraham. But that's kind of the idea of how like The Secret works, and that's how we manifest. Is we control our thoughts. We choose thoughts that will create the things we want, and the way that our thoughts create is by influencing our feelings. Now, whether at that point it's our actions that are the ones that are actually turning it into like manifesting it, or whether it's our vibration drawing things to us, I think probably both are very true. But that's how we create. So where I'm getting with all of this, these are all of these ideas I've been playing with, is that this idea that we are made in the image of God. And what I told my husband on Friday was, I think what that means is that God is the creator. We are made in the image of God, the creator. And the image, like the likeness, is that we are also creators. And I just find this idea so fun and interesting and deep, and it has all these layers I'm still exploring, but we are creators. And Abraham talks a lot about like why we're even here. What is it that this experience is all about? And it's very much just exploring that we're basically here to create. And they talk about the leading edge of creation, that we're kind of out here on the leading edge as we're creating. And the way I think of it is like an event horizon or the Big Bang, right? So if you imagine, or even if you just think about like a nuclear bomb explosion, right? You have like this, boom, this explosion, which for us is like an inspiration, an idea, a desire wells up in us. And then it's an event horizon, and then it's out, and on the edge of it, it's creating something as it moves out, that the universe is constantly expanding. And Abraham would say it's expanding through us, through each of us. Each of us is how God creates, right? Like he doesn't create, or she, or whatever. God, I don't really think is that kind of a being, but that God doesn't create like I'm sitting up here and today I'm going to make this. God creates through us while we're living and dreaming and doing and acting and being. And God creates through us from like the billions of people, from the billions of perspectives. And that's what makes the creation so dynamic and so interesting and so fun, right? So that the universe is still being created. All of beingness is still being created, and we are the front on which it's being created. And so this idea that every one of us has this totally unique perspective, that we came here, that we chose our body and our lives and our home. We chose some frameworks about what we wanted to work on while we were here. And we chose all of that based on our unique perspective. And then while we're here, we have all of this history to us and the way we're raised and the way we see the world, and all of that influences what we want. And it is our desires, like these impulses that occur into us, like, I would like to do that. I would like to become a life coach. I would like to go become a teacher. Whatever it is that you have an idea to go do, that is the creative energy at work. And every one of us has a completely different perspective, nuance from one another, that reflects all of the unique things about the way that we have lived and the way that we think and the way that we view the world. And we're creating with that. So every time we have a desire and then we go set out making it happen, we are expanding the universe. The universe is expanding through us because we are made in the image of God as creators. So interesting to me, like just blows my mind. And it leads me to think, like, what do I want to create? And the other thing that I really love, the other concept I want to kind of introduce here, which I think is super helpful in times like these where there's so much strife and conflict, and we see all these people who are doing things that we don't agree with, that think in ways we don't agree with. We put labels onto ourselves and onto other people, and then we reject all of the things that are other than us. And I think increasingly that's becoming like we're putting a moral judgment on it. Like, if you don't think the way I think about everything, then you're just like an immoral human and I can't even understand. That we see all of this, and Abraham would describe that as contrast, right? Like, this is what I think and you think something else. That's contrast. This is where I am, and this is what's over there, and the difference between them is contrast. And Abraham describes it that contrast is like absolutely critical, because without contrast, you wouldn't have any preferences. You wouldn't have any desires arise within you. And desires are the creative, like that's where the creation starts from, is from your desire. So like it's absolutely critical that we all see things differently from one another, and that all these things be happening that are different from what we're doing and where we're sitting and what we're thinking, because all of that contrast is what gives rise to desires, and then those desires give rise to the vibrations. Like, so we have a desire, that's a thought, that gives rise to a feeling that is a vibration, and then that vibration is what determines what we create, either just by, as Abraham would talk about it, drawing to us things that are similar, or just by driving our actions, according to my coach Brooke, that are what cause us to actually go out and like physically create a thing. And so you can't have desire, and you can't create, and you can't play out your role as a creator in the image of God if you don't have contrast. So all of this stuff that we're freaking out about, where we're like, why don't these people think the way that I think? I can't believe that they would possibly do that. It's contrast. Like, that's all it is. And yes, you can argue with all of the things that you think, but it's terrible what they're doing. But it's all just here to feed our desires. Like, if you're one of the people who's like, this president, like, I cannot, like, I'm surrounded by a lot of the people who think that, and they're just like, I cannot. But then I look at those people and I think, okay, what don't you like, right? What does this president help? Like, by seeing that as this contrast that is the president and how he thinks of something differently than you do, you're actually envisioning a different world that isn't like that, isn't like the things you don't like. And we may be, all the people who are struggling with the president now are creating, but through the contrast of seeing things they don't like. They're like, I don't like that. I want a world that looks like this. And every time somebody thinks that, they start to create and bring that other thing into being. Just so interesting to me. And I think all the, if you're not the person who has the problem with this president, you're a person who had the problem with the last president, right? It doesn't matter, like, insert any president, right? Especially politics has really become like the labels now, the buckets that we're in. I think because people are letting go of religion, religious affiliations, and we're becoming a little bit more geographically mobile. There's a lot less identity that's built up in like where we live and what we believe and all these things. So instead, now we've replaced, because we want to have identities, we've replaced those types of identities with this political identity. And even if you don't associate yourself with being a Democrat or Republican, you probably associate yourself like, well, damn it, I'm not a Democrat or Republican, right? Like, we have this very strong sense of where we fit, and we want to put labels on it, or at least we want to say not that label, right? Strong sense around it. So whichever president it is you feel that way about, just realize that, think about the things that you created, that you dreamed up because of the things you saw that you didn't like, that you didn't identify with. This is how it works. Like, maybe you have a family member who does things that just drive you crazy, and you think, oh my God, they're doing it all wrong. But it's you looking at it and saying, I don't like it that way, is causing you to create on that event horizon. Like, I want to create something different than that. And if it wasn't there for you to react to, you wouldn't be creating over there, right? So you're creating more of what you want because you're seeing things you don't want. And that's how it works. And I like this. This is kind of where I want to close it, but I really like that idea. I find it serves me so much, because like, I don't spend all my time being pissed off about who's president and how they're doing things. I mean, of course, I agree with some of it, and I don't agree with some of it, depending on whatever, right? But I can kind of see, like, in some sense, it doesn't matter in the way that a lot of us think that it does. It matters in the sense that it's helping me think about what I do want. Anytime I see something I don't want, it helps me figure out what I do want, and then I can use that to go create. And that's, in fact, why I'm here. And that's why you're here. Like, we're here to create. And it would suck to create in an environment where there was no contrast, because we'd have no fuel. We'd have no inspiration. We'd have nothing to, we'd just be like, things are good. Everybody agrees with me. Everybody thinks about everything the way that I think about them. Everybody's doing things according to the book that I have about what we should be doing. So here I am. Like, you would not create anything from that environment. And so we're here to create then the contrast that exists in your environment that is probably currently freaking you out is here in order to help you be a more inspired creator. And if you can just start to play with that idea, you probably can get to where, like me, you just feel a lot less frantic or upset about the way things go. Because I promise you, if you love the president we have now, there'll be another president that you don't like. And if you hate the president now, there'll be another president that you do like. Like, that's just how it works, okay? Like, we're just constantly, the pendulum is swinging, things are constantly changing and constantly moving. Everybody who's freaking out about where things are right now is creating and creating, and then we'll probably see that show up in the next president, and then that's going to create all this contrast for the people who don't like that president, and then they're going to create and create, and then we're going to see that manifest itself in the next. Like, this is how it goes. There's no like end point where we're like, okay, well, we finally got the right president that we all agree on. Like, that's not a thing. And I'm using this political example a lot just because I think this is the area where I most see people like freaking out about contrast and like, this could not possibly be a good thing. But pick your area, you know, even if it's your neighbor throwing your leaves in your yard that drives you crazy, or your son that's constantly leaving his socks on the ground and you're like, I don't want it to be this way, right? Like that is contrast. And it's helping you figure out what you do want and what you want to create. And if you can think of it that way, that this is here to help me figure out what I do want, and it's not necessarily like this is terribly wrong and I have to change everything about it, it just feels better. Like, you're not, it puts you back in this position of power, and back in this position of responsibility, that like, I get to choose how I want to think about that, and how I think about that will determine what I create. So like, I have a huge responsibility here to create something that I want to create. So let me choose how I want to think about it, because what I think about it will determine my feelings, and that will determine what I create. All right, this has been a bit of a ramble. I'm sorry. But these are the things that are kind of rolling around in my brain. I hope you found them interesting and hopefully not too offensive, although I guess maybe somebody might. But I just think that it's such an interesting idea that we're all here to create, that every one of us is creating from our own unique perspective. And it does feel a little bit like responsibility, but it also just feels like exciting. Like, oh, I want to become a better creator. I want to become more in conscious control of my thoughts, so that what I create is what I want to create and what I want to offer the world, instead of like what I'm accidentally creating through habitual thought patterns. I really like that idea. It kind of spurs me forward. And I hope that it inspires you and that you find this concept interesting. Maybe go pick up one of these books. Course in Miracles is super long. Just tell you now. But even if you do what I did and just read part of it, it's very interesting work. And I hope you enjoy it. So please send me questions, send me comments, send me your thoughts as you watch this. I would love to hear from you. Obviously, this idea, the way to talk about it is not totally gelled with me. But so your questions and your comments will help kind of guide me in the future, so I can get a little bit more articulate about it. Hope you have a wonderful rest of your Sunday or whatever day you're watching this, and I will talk to you next week. Thanks.